In the United States, there's a couple of ways that we are instructed that we can measure our value and our accomplishments. One has to do with education and or a specialty after we have received some form of education. I used to be a journalist, which would be a time during which some people might evaluate a standard upon which to base me, which means that in order to discuss matters related to facts, you need at least three sources in order for it to be a fact. And so, working with what I have accessible without going to the internet, I have a few things to consider. See, at some point, I had a bond, and when certain things happen, a variety of other people were bonded to civil rights. I was bonded to terrorism. So, if I am trying to identify or understand matters concerning poverty in America with a reference point of it being Michael Harrington's Other America, and I understand that a variety of other people on some side of some sort of equation have been bonded to civil rights, and I've been bonded to terrorism, then I need to use my available sources to see what I have to work with. The book I have that might provide reference would be Documentary History of Banking and Currency in the United States. I would seek something perhaps related to the gold standard and or currency or price fixing as a means by which to finance activities that might undermine safety or security, as many of the early colonists in the United States were identified as terrorists, and also later at various points had to deal with people manipulating policy around the monetary system in order to aid and abet efforts to undermine the domestic security, including the asset base upon which people base their material security. There's four of those books. I actually have a number of reports that have been put, readings that have been put into voice files I can reference as the time warrants. I also have this international asset securitization. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the index readily available discussing matters connected to terrorism. And there's also nothing readily available connected to matters of what would be my second choice for a reference point. But I'm going to see if I can find anything under insurance. Commercial mortgage securitization of, which unfortunately, like it or not, is pretty much the core matter of the issue at this point in time. But in order for me to go there, I would then have to cross reference it with the first book, which I could, specifically concerning a treatise that Benjamin Franklin wrote early on when the governor of Pennsylvania was discussing coinage and coinage laws. It was arguing with the legislature about some of the recommendations they had. And Benjamin Franklin was concurrently writing an analysis of an understanding of the nascent financial system and the role specifically that residential or rather land property provided for that kind of valuation. But in order for me to fulfill the terms of the bond somebody else took out on me without even disclosing it, I would have to be able to provide facts concerning the original bond, which had to do with terrorism. And unfortunately, in my World Book Encyclopedia from 1955, the reference under terrorist is see anarchist. Now, unfortunately, pretty much everything about my life has been allowed to be expropriated by somebody else who put a patent on it and then redistributed it to someone else after it had the Texas turning twist. See, that's my analysis, right? Because what happened was the fact that I came from a military background was supposed to be completely like persona non grata, right? It wasn't acceptable for there to be anything about me coming from a military background that could have provided an inspiration or could have provided any sort of foundation for consideration of the other possibilities that were available, except for trying to make me a sort of token of some sort of representation of my particular appearances of ethnic belonging. Because if they had, then the Texas Turing twist could have been understood as an aberration of a successful policy applied during World War II in the European campaign engaged by the United States. See, it was actually, I believe, an act of sabotage. But then the question becomes, why would a command officer in an alliance sabotage the tactical considerations of a field commander that was actually in charge of troop deployments in a specific area. Well, then you have to talk about issues connected to a command authority. Then you have to talk about issues connected to long term access to resources. Then you have to talk about the occult. And I don't know if I am deemed to have a culture suitable to have those conversations with people in person. The other implementation of the Texas turn-in twist, which has come to light recently, because I'm not going to talk about the legal system right now. What I will talk about is blockchain technology. And this understanding that if we allow for a complete depersonalization of our own lives, and we get into this concept that somehow it is okay to inherit or inhabit a position of somebody else's situs once they have vacated it or once they've been excused, then we subordinate our own legacy with an understanding that we are part of a bigger morass and that we fulfill whatever the mandate is as appropriate. Some people used to call these sorts of things a command economy. This has a certain value, this has a certain function. We are strategically designing and deciding who goes where at what point in time. So how does one determine who goes where? And by the way, who determines who goes where when? My culture was not poor. My culture was appropriated in the wrong manner. And there were people responsible for those appropriations. Yet, they were never held to account for them. They took things they should not have when they should not have.